Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Squat Cobbler. I'm Dr. Mike at Official Pagan on everything because I would never forget my social media
There you go.
handles there. And before I get too lost, I'm also going to say you should like and subscribe because at 1,000 subscribers on the Bog Panda YouTube channel, we're going to have a party. Chuck Garrick's invited. You know what that means. Kelly's going to get his opportunity to teach him a
to,
lesson in distance.
to have his butt kicked from. He'll live stream it. You can watch it.
I made a post before. I don't know if you saw it on
I
Instagram.
did. Yes, I saw
Yeah,
it.
and I tagged Chuck Garrick
Yeah.
in the off chance that he's gonna look at that post.
Yeah. I'm I'm gonna need to do some explaining to Chuck somehow.
He's
But
gonna be at this party. I'm gonna do everything I can because I feel like we're growing at a pretty good rate right now, but we still got a little bit of time. I'm gonna do everything I can to somehow get in touch with this man and get him to this party.
yeah, that would be yeah, that would be awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram, and we're back to talk some more retro gaming and nothing more about Chuck Garrick for the rest of the show, I hope. Although he's
Yes,
awesome.
and
He's
we're
an awesome guy.
I mean, an awesome guy that Kelly said he could punch in the face.
Yeah.
So anyway, as a unit of
It's a
measurement.
unit of measurement, like a cubit. Like that. So,
But today we're here to talk about something I came across, and I wish I'd known. Apparently, pre-orders for this started a few months ago, and I remember seeing something about this online because I think this game has been in development for a little bit. So I remember seeing something about it before, but I've never. So first, I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Kelly, are you an Intellivision guy?
no, I'm not. I've had, of all the gaming consoles out there, I've had an opportunity to interact, including Virtual Boy. Never an owner, fortunately, but I've had experience with it. But I am not. I know some of the other folks I've talked to about what we've been doing here were big Intellivision folks, but I've never actually played a single game on the system.
So I was not an Intellivision guy. I mean, it's a little bit before my time, but um, not that long ago, in the apartment that I lived in prior to medical school, um, before I became the medical influencer that I am.
The the real
The,
estate oriented medical school you went to, yes.
um, at Games, our friends at Games did an Intellivision console, like a plug and play Intellivision. And I knew of Intellivision, like I knew this thing existed. I had seen it before, and I played a couple of scattered games on like retro gaming collections and totally legal ROMs that had
Absolutely.
popped up.
.com.
Um, yeah. At various points, but never like deep dived into Intellivision in any way. I got the at Games unit though. So there was a Rite Aid right around the corner. So the apartment complex that I lived in was actually like this old industrial building that was turned into luxury apartments that I lived in. They were nice, don't get me wrong, but they were very dated. Um, but there was a Rite Aid, which is Rite Aid nationwide?
I think so. Well,
Okay.
they at least make it out towards the mid. We don't have a lot of them around here, but it's a name I'm familiar with.
Okay. So I was gonna because I was mentioning Wawa to somebody not long ago, and they're like, "What's a Wawa?" And that's specifically East Coast and especially Pennsylvania thing. So
Yeah,
forgot about that.
and I only learned about it because some folks that were down in Florida talking about it, and it's a magical place. It really is.
Wawa?
Yeah, in turn for food, it's all right.
Absolutely, yeah. There was something I think our friend Dylan had posted something, and it was like he was complaining. It was one of those fast food maps, like what's more popular here and there and stuff like that. And it had for like Pennsylvania, it was like places to get chicken or something. And it had for Pennsylvania, it had Popeyes, which and I looked it up because I was like, there's absolutely no way it's Popeyes here, like the most popular. And I looked it up, and we have I want to say it was like 35 Popeyes, which honestly is more than I would have guessed, but not a huge number. Then I looked up Wawas in Pennsylvania. According to the official company site, just in Pennsylvania, there are 900 Wawas. That's one state. That's not 900 Wawas East Coast. That is Pennsylvania. 900 locations currently operating. You really can't go more than a couple of blocks, particularly in Philadelphia, without hitting a Wawa. And I love it.
Yeah.
um,
By the way, Wawa, if you're wondering, sponsorship opportunities are available for the Squat Cobbler podcast. Should you like to join us, and we will accept food.
check my Uber Eats account. I'm a good customer. You make us breakfast pretty frequently. um, but so before I make the other faux pas there, Rite Aid is a drugstore for anybody who doesn't have a Rite Aid. Um, I went to the Rite Aid and they sell like other little things there too. They do have like a little bit of electronics section, and every once in a while I would catch something weird in there,
Mm-hmm.
like a when PS3 was big, like they had like two PS3s that first came out, that random things.
Yeah.
But they had an Et Games, and this was like near the holidays. They had the Et Games Intellivision plug and play. So I did pick that up. I did play it. There were some decent games on Intellivision. It is compared to 2600 and the some of the Commodore stuff and all, and Amiga and all that. It doesn't compare to that. So it is a step back from those. It's not bad though. Like there was some decent games on there. But I've never been a huge fan. And there is for our modern retro gaming people, there is a new iteration of Intellivision coming out. A company is resurrecting Intellivision with a new generation Intellivision system. I did not pre-order one. Not it looks cool, like the system itself looks cool. None of the games have caught my attention so far. That's not a negative thing. Like hopefully cool games come out for it. But similar to the Atari VCS that recently came out, and Kelly and I had talked about that in our Atari episodes, looks cool, but there's no games that have really caught my eye for it yet. However, one thing that does always interest me is Castlevania related content. I am a gigantic Castlevania fan. Have you played any of the Castlevania
So,
games? So
so I have kind of because it's. I mean, what platform is it not on? In
right,
terms of tons and tons of version, and it goes through an evolution in terms of. I mean, significantly different gameplay and storyline as you go into later iterations that you can almost can't even call sequels to it, moving from the side scroller to more the first person shooter kind of deal. So I'm most of my experience has been with the side scroller. I've liked multiple versions of that. There is I have a version available on my Legends Ultimate that's Haunted House. Excuse me, Haunted Castle, which is it's Castlevania, but it's for the arcade and a little tougher than the not that the Intellivision or the not that the original Castlevania was super easy, but there's a Haunted Castle arcade version too. So I'm familiar with that and a lot of the side scrolling stuff. But where did you do the whole gamut? Is there a particular kind of era you
pretty
like?
much all. I've pretty much been a Castlevania fan from the beginning, from the original NES games. My favorite era of it though is the 16-bit era. Those are, in my opinion, just the perfect games because you get still a lot of that side-scrolling platforming action of the earlier games, but with improved graphics and what would become really the hallmark of the series of the later games, which are adding more of the RPG elements,
Yep.
building up weapons and experience and things like that. So you got kind of the best of both worlds in the middle.
Yep.
So the 16-bit era is my favorite. You had Super Castlevania for Super Nintendo, Rondo of Blood for TurboGrafx 16, which the sequel to that is Symphony of the Night, which is the most famous and beloved of the Castlevania franchise. Rondo of Blood's better. You guys are wrong. And of course, Genesis had Bloodline, which is one of my favorites. Bloodline, because Genesis didn't have the restrictions. Up until that point, it was a primarily Nintendo platform game. And then they started splitting off in the 16-bit era and Genesis because they were a little more loose with violence and adult content, that's when you got your first sort of mature leaning Castlevania that would really take over the series from that point forward. They're all kind of a little more adult. I mean, compared to like Grand Theft Auto and stuff that would come later, nothing like that, but a little more edge to it than the Nintendo games had. So always a huge Castlevania fan. So anything Castlevania kind of pops up in my YouTube feed. Then all of a sudden this week, a number of reviews have popped up for IntelliVania. So obviously a lot of retro gaming stuff pops up, a lot of Castlevania stuff in general pops up for me. So IntelliVania I had to check out, and I sent Kelly the first video that I ended up watching on this. So apparently there has been a homebrew game in the works for a while of people trying to port the original Castlevania to Intellivision. And like I said, Intellivision is, particularly compared to the first generation NES, a pretty big step back, technologically speaking. I'm not saying the games are bad. Technologically speaking, is a big step back. Castlevania, for being a sort of earlier Nintendo game, was way ahead of its time. Like that was, a killer app kind of thing at the time for them, because the game was pretty big and sprawling and had a lot of detail in it that the earlier Nintendo games did not have. So that kind of showed you where Nintendo was going at that point. And that's why it was a really important game in their development as a company.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to peg how you would describe, Intellivision graphics, because it's kind of like so better than the 2600, better than kind of the original Atari kind of stuff, but
not much.
Not much. It's just
Yeah.
it's what used to be represented with one big pixel is now four slightly smaller pixels, but they're still big blocks making everything.
Yeah, exactly. So their sort of plight to bring Castlevania to Intellivision as anything more than, stick figures, throwing things at other stick figures on platforms that are just lines, seems pretty impossible. But apparently after years of development, they did it. And there's a indie game company that picked it up and is releasing it on an Intellivision cartridge. So you can get a fully packaged one. Now, I do not have an Intellivision system that will play cartridges. I am tempted by this, though, just as being a huge Castlevania fan that I am. Like this weird sort of anomaly in the Castlevania world, I guess. And of course, this is not, officially a Castlevania game. This is IntelliVania. But basically, it is the entire first game reworked for Intellivision. So all of the levels apparently are there, all of the weapons, all of the enemies, which again, this is something that's on the surface is seemingly far beyond what Intellivision is capable of. But watching the video footage of it, while again, huge step back graphically over even the original NES game, it's incredibly impressive for Intellivision.
Yeah, I was really impressed seeing a little bit of the gameplay footage that was there, because kind of one of the key things in the game is there are a variety of enemies that you're going to have to deal with that are each attack and approach by that each one is different, and that kind of comes into a little bit of your weapon selection and strategy on stuff. And so it's important to be able to, which is super easy to do on any of the Nintendo versions or later, to say, that's a zombie, that's a Shadow Panther, that's a this, that's a that. And while, it's probably not a textbook illustration of a zombie, you at least kind of go, okay, that's different than that, and it kind of sort of looks like this. So given the limitations, I think they have done an excellent job.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Given the limitations of with the Intellivision, and again, not an original Intellivision guy, but playing the plug and play system, which had like 50 Intellivision games on it. So I've seen it a vast amount now, later in life kind of thing. This is so far beyond what any of those games were capable of doing. And on an actual Intellivision cartridge, this isn't just a ROM that's out there. Because one of the things with homebrew games or indie games that's great and weird at the same time is without the limitations of the space in the cartridge, you could theoretically make a homebrew game that is much larger in capacity than a cartridge could handle. So even though, yeah, it's playing on, a Nintendo virtually or an Intellivision virtually, you can't cram that into a cartridge. This is on a cartridge, an Intellivision cartridge. So that's the most interesting part of it to me in a way.
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, in terms of just one, the ability to code it, to get the play right, the gameplay right, but then to also be able to, because it is a pretty expansive game, to pull that all off under, it's like making it doubly hard on themselves. Like, we'll do it on one of the toughest platforms to be successful in, and add size limitation. Go. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about the cartridge. And nothing that I can find. So there was recently a Sega Genesis cartridge that was released for a very now already infamous game called Paprium recently that would be on. So the company that put it out had done like a Kickstarter campaign, but like a few years ago, and then basically didn't tell anybody anything for a big chunk of the development. A lot of people apparently just assumed they threw their money away, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, cartridges are shipping out to people, which they were excited about, but at the same time, like frustrated because there was a couple of years of, I guess, radio silence of what was going on with this. But when the cartridge came out, it is on a Genesis cartridge, but it would be the largest game that's ever been put on a 16-bit cartridge. I believe it's 80 megs, the size of the game, which is substantial, especially since, the bulk of the 16-bit era games were, 16 megs, 8 megs. You had some that were 24 and 32, and then towards the very end of the system, you got a couple of 40 meg games that came out. But that was really, really pushing it. And I remember my one friend got Super Street Fighter 2 as the 40 meg game for Genesis, and playing that on like a Generation 1 Sega and having to like turn it off every once in a while because it would actually overheat the console playing it. So this 80 meg cartridge is, kind of insane. But the way that they accomplished that was there's another chipset that they built into the cartridge that's helping run this overly large game that the actual system itself can't really handle. To the best of my knowledge, though, that is not happening with IntelliVania. I can't find anything talking about that. So as far as I know, this is running off a just genuine Intellivision cartridge.
impressive stuff. Really good. Yeah.
So did it make you want to try this game looking at that video footage?
Yeah, it did. I was trying to figure out now, and I mean, I don't mean to like, pick on a sore point, but I have a Super Console X that came with games loaded on it that work, and most of the versions and platforms you talked about today, I can play, and I was kind of doing that. So I think maybe offline, you and I need to have another conversation. Maybe I'll point you the route I went to get mine, and if you want to give it another go. Because if since you're such a big Castlevania fan, you'll get quite a selection that was on there. I even had played one of the Nintendo 64 versions, which was more of that first person shooter kind of view, or I guess third person, but it wasn't the side scroll, and for Nintendo 64 it's pretty cool, but. Yeah, it was. I'm tempted, so I'll have to see. Obviously, this version, if I can find a way to legally acquire the ROM, I will try. I will try it on it, but I don't know what they're going to do cartridge-wise. I'm assuming the emulation engine and stuff I've got on Super Console X would allow me to do it. Should the ROM be available at some point, but. Yeah, I want to kind of look to see what I could do from because there is kind of just the nostalgia side of the Intellivision stuff, and I've really not interacted with it much. You seem to be kind of okay on the plug and play you got for Intellivision, so maybe that's where I'll go. But yeah, I'm probably not gonna go out and secure an Intellivision to play this one cartridge though.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing. Like the plug and play is fine and everything, but I'm not going to go hunt down an Intellivision for this cartridge. So I really hope they release a legitimate digital version of it so that I can download it and play it that way. I would love to have something like this when I get my At Games Legends Mini set up here. I would love to have something like that on
Yeah,
there. That would
that
be
would be
great.
excellent.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's cool. I'm glad you spotted that and shared it. We'll include a link to the video that Mike shared with me initially in the description in the on YouTube, so you guys can check that out. And I was going to ask a little bit. So, it seems two games that are linked a lot are Castlevania and Metroid.
Metroidvania.
Metroidvania. There you go. That would be
No, it's a term people use a lot for that
uh,
type of game.
yeah, because it's just very similar. What I don't know, because I'm not as steeped as you are on the kind of lore and legacy of this, which came first? Do you know?
I'm not positive. So Metroidvania is a term that a lot of people use because the construction of the original Metroid and the original Castlevania are very similar.
Yep.
As far as, it gave you a more complex platforming with more expansive levels than you saw in Nintendo. And Nintendo platforming was their bread and butter. I mean, they're built off of Mario and all that. So this was a more complex version of that. It also gave you upgradable weapons and things like that that the platformers at the time didn't give you. More enemies, upgradable weapons, and that sort of stuff. So that's why they get lumped together a lot. I'm not positive which one came first. I want to say Metroid only because Castlevania graphically is slightly more intensive than Metroid is. Metroid has a lot of just black backgrounds at parts of it in the original Metroid, whereas Castlevania does have more background elements to it. Again, though, both games graphically are way more expansive than I love the original Mario Brothers, and it's bright and colorful in a way that Metroid and Castlevania aren't. So I can see where people be like, "This looks great."